Can you hear me well? Awesome. I'm excited to be here today to host this great panel on coding and creativity in education. Before we start, I know yesterday was the party. With a show of hands, how many of you guys were at the party yesterday? Some of you. Okay, almost half maybe. Partly because of the party and partly to get you more involved in this panel, I would ask you all to stand. Come on. So, I would like you to remain standing if you've ever heard of Raspberry Pi. Not the dessert, but the microcomputer. Okay, all of us, awesome. I would like you to remain standing if you've also heard about BBC Micro. Cool. Okay. And if you do prefer to sit down, all of you, you can, and I'll mention the BBC Micro. Because the thing is, coding and education has been a hot topic ever since we had, since the dawn of computing. And there's been several initiatives to highlight this. One of them were BBC Micro. In 1981, it was released. It was an initiative from BBC to create a microcomputer and to distribute it mainly to schools, but to everyone who had an interest. And that was then followed up by Raspberry Pi in 2012. There was a similar initiative. Eben Upton, that was one of the people behind it, he was working as a professor at Cambridge, and they were trying to get more people to apply for computer or code educations. So that ties in there. Today, we're going to focus on something that kind of was a wave following together with Raspberry Pi, MOOCs and bootcamps. Udacity, for example, was launched the same time as the Raspberry Pi was released. And to tie it in with my nice t-shirt, Commodore, as I'm sure a lot of you knows, was just released a year after BBC Micro. So all of that intro and context aside, let's welcome our panel members for today. Micael Holmström, please come on stage. Micael is the CEO and co-founder of Academy Group, a sister company of Academic Work. He has over 2 decades of experience directing new business initiatives for a wide range of international companies. He currently sits on the board of a number of IT and tech companies, and is frequently invited to speak about accelerated learning, which I'm sure we'll hear more about today. Kathleen Mullaney, welcome. She is the Vice President of Careers at Udacity, and she joined Udacity in 2011 as their 3rd ever employee. Having spent the better part of 3 years leading the course development team, building awesome learning experiences, she is now focused on getting graduates of Udacity programs new jobs that they love. And prior to Udacity, Kathleen was a data analyst working on Google Maps, where she created tools to help improve team process and map data quality. Then I would like to welcome on stage Marva L Wesley. She is the founder and CEO of InspireHer. She's an ex-pharma drug designer, now half-time apprentice engineer at Nokia Forcefield, France, and half-time student at EPITA Engineer School. She's driven by a passion for health and treatment of diseases and an interest in how computer science can accelerate the research process. And she came to know, and in this process, she came to notice that there was a remarkable lack of women in tech. And in order to help close this gender gap, she decided to start InspireHer to inform and guide girls to choose right education and inspire them towards a big career in tech. So, the last panel member, I'd like to welcome on stage Thomas Bachem. He is the founder and chancellor at Code University of Applied Sciences. He is a passionate entrepreneur, investor, and founder of several startups and initiatives. Being an avid coder and designer since his early youth, he is currently building Code, a private university educating the software developers, digital designers, and entrepreneurs of tomorrow. Awesome. So now we'll get to the meat of the panel, almost. We'll start with a round of insights and opinions from the panel members before we get to the questions. And obviously, we're talking on the topic of coding and education. Micael, would you like to start with your views and your focus of activity in the area of code in education?
Oh, absolutely. And I want to sort of pick up what Joel talked about before we got up on stage here, that IT has really changed and sort of software is eating in the world. I think we all have heard that. And that's changing the demands on developers today, because it's really difficult to distinguish between what's the business side and what's the tech side. So I think we need a new type of developer that understands the tech part, but also the business side. And if you add to that the lack of skilled developers, we have realized that we need to do something new to invite a lot more people from different areas into this lovely place that we call IT and development, and make sure that they are welcomed, give the right training, and can start contributing from day one.
Great, nice. Kathleen?
So I joined Udacity after I had taught myself how to code, because I realized just 1 year out of university that if I didn't know how to code, I would not really have a career. So I was working as a data analyst, and I was one of the only people who actually didn't have a programming background, but I had a maps background. So that was my skill set. And so I then, after work, was going to community colleges, classes, and actually, begging all the engineers that were on my team at Google Maps to help me learn Python. And it was a great experience, but it also showed me that, hey, the system's broken. I just got, 4 years of education, $42,000 in debt from that education, and now I'm not even ready for my job. So when I met the founders of Udacity, it really struck a chord with me to say that there has to be a better way. All companies now are tech companies, and we have to figure out how we actually get more people with these skill sets, and we can't just rely on the next generation of people to bring those skill sets. We actually need to transform our current workforce. So I hope everybody knows that's what we do at Udacity, and why I'm so passionate about it is my own personal experience. So.
Nice, thanks. Marva?
So I think that today all education gonna lead to technology, because I start with biology, like really just like the normal way of research. But I'm going to talk like just as a girl, we didn't have like enough choice, enough options today, because I had like the best mark in mathematics and physics in high school. But anyway, I went to biology, like I don't know why, but just like a normal, like either med school or biology and chemistry, pharmaceutical. And but at the end, I just see that I don't have any visibility about my future after the bachelor degrees. And I was like, what should I do? Because even my professor didn't have an answer for me, like what kind of job I could have. So for me, there is, in education today, there is a lack of information, more about girls, I would say, because they are the most person that really touch of this lack of information. So this lack of information leads to a wrong orientation. But today, I think we have enough information in internet, but it's not the way that those students will understand it. That's why I think that with InspireHer, I think just to have them the right information, that they get enough informed to choose their career in education. And anyway, I changed my career. I went to computer science after doing this drug design master degrees. It's a combination between computer science and chemistry. And this also, like, we are the unique master degrees in the whole Europe, and it's like something really great to do and something really important today, and nobody knows about it. So we just need to make sure that this information get everywhere to everyone.
I guess, like most of you, I started coding when I was 12 years old and was a self-taught software developer. And when I started looking for study programs like 13 years ago, to continue like learning, I was, to be honest, I was turned off by computer science degrees mostly, because they focused very much on the theoretical and mathematical backgrounds of software development. And for me, it was much more about creativity, also about interdisciplinary stuff. So I was always a developer, a designer, a product manager, all in one, so to say. And I didn't find that in existing degrees. And I then went on to found some startups, but always came back to this point that I realized all the people I was looking for and I was hiring, the good ones were always self-taught, and that appealed strange to me. So at some point 2 years ago, I decided to build my own university in Berlin, Code. It's a state-accredited university with bachelor degrees, and while we're on one hand state-accredited, on the other hand, we try to be as different as possible from traditional universities. So we're fully student-centered, we have a strictly project-based learning approach, and it's very much more community-driven, peer learning. There's a lot of concepts in education, in modern education, that I think we really need to have a look at, because traditional university and higher education in general is very out of fashion and like also feels like it's out of time, because it's mostly focused on lectures. And that's what we want to change. We want to focus on helping students to learn on their own instead of just accumulating knowledge.
Awesome. That's a good lead-in to the type of question we wanted to address first, in terms of, as many of the panel members have been mentioning, they're representing the non-traditional learning paths in education, as opposed to the traditional university or other higher degrees. Maybe we can address how these are, if these are viable, because I think there's a lot of people's mind is, do I take a risk if I go for a non-traditional path as opposed to the traditionally safer university way?
Could I give a quote? I wanted to quote a stat that I think would actually help set the stage here. It actually rides on Joel Spolsky's talk in the last fireside chat here, is that from the 2016 Stack Overflow developer survey, the number of people who said that they're self-taught is actually double the number of people who have a bachelor's degree. So 69% of people, of engineers, state that they're self-taught. Only almost 35% actually have a formal degree in the subject. The next biggest percentage is actually people who learn on the job. So the majority of developers out there are not going through these formal linear paths that I think that we think is like the way to do it. It actually, the data doesn't prove that.
Yeah, great point. Micael, do you want to give a few words about your type of?
Yeah, and I also would like to start by sort of addressing the fact that even if it would be the right way to go the traditional way, there's not enough people, so we really have a choice here. Like, either we don't find the people we need, or we need to think in new ways. And I think the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a new result. And so we decided we need to do something completely different. So we decided to create this new way of recruiting, where we actually look at people's abilities, and we just throw the grades and your CV out the window, and we measure instead your, for example, logical abilities, your drive, your passion, because what we also see is that what the Americans like to call grit is probably one of the most important parts, that you really stick to it. And when we started creating our curriculum, we focused on what is actually happening in the tech world today. Because it's moving so fast, so a lot of the times, you have fantastic teachers, fantastic students at universities, but it's a 5-year education, and what you learn in the beginning is obsolete by year 2, and then you still have 3 more years. So we decided to have a shorter 12-week training focused on what's the really stuff that is happening today. And then to just prove the concept, we said, you know what, F it. We're going to hire everybody ourselves. So today we have actually recruited, trained, and hired over 500 developers just to prove that this works.
Wow, yeah.
Just want to say something about this traditional way of education about coding, because as an engineer, I can say that at school we can't have enough time to practice. So it's much more about theoretical, and I think we had enough of just like people having like 5 years of theoretical without practicing. You just finish your study and just like you don't know what to do because you don't have any experience, any practice of it. So self-taught, or the universities or the classes like Udacity, you have more practice. That's why I think it's more important to have a point on it.
Definitely. Yeah.
I wanted to add that this is a general thing, not just applying to like our industry or to software developers. It's in general, there's a big problem in education with this, that it's very theoretical and impractical. And I would even say, as someone who's like dealing a lot with the traditional scientific academic system to get stuff accredited, that it's even a big discussion between like, yeah, science or traditional academic understanding and learning. So traditionally, like universities, for example, were meant to educate scientists, like researchers. But then more and more people flock to them, and these days universities are essentially the standard way to do business education as well, or professional education in general. And there's a big conflict in that, because the professors act still like they are meant to teach scientists, but you know, most of us don't want to be scientists. And that's a big thing that will change over the next years.
And even if people wanted to be scientists, there aren't any jobs.
Yeah, true.
There you go. Yeah. From my own experiences and tying in with the panel here, people choose to either supplement their education, traditional education, with courses, because if they know, they might realize that when they go into the workforce, their skills are lacking. But I think it also, these non-traditional education paths sort of attracts a more diverse crowd than your traditional student starting straight from school into university. Do you maybe have some points on the diversity in non-traditional education, and if that's a good or a bad thing, or both? Is it something that maybe the companies can benefit from if they hire someone that has gone this route as opposed to straight out of university?
Yeah, and I think that's super important. I mean, like we said in the beginning, IT is changing. IT is becoming business, and business is becoming IT. So bringing in prior knowledge, experience, not only from education, but also from work. We have a lot of our clients telling us, like, the developers we produce are essentially unicorns. And I mean, I hate that term. Every startup is supposed to talk about unicorns, but it comes from our clients, and what they're saying is that we have people now that really understand the business side, but they also know how to program. So that combination is so powerful, and we have had so many amazing examples. We had one guy, for example, who used to be a truck driver. He came to us, learned how to code, and he's now working on developing logistics systems. And he might not be the best coder in the room, but he knows exactly how it is to be a truck driver using these systems. So I think that is adding a tremendous amount of quality to everything that we do. And I really think that what we need to start focusing on is, I know this might be a bad analogy, but if you remember the old Bruce Willis movie, Armageddon, he creates this team of very diverse people with different skill sets. And I think that's exactly the way you should approach it. You shouldn't just have super engineers with a traditional background. You need to bring in a lot of different people. And the only thing I would say they did wrong in that movie is they had no female participants. That was the only problem. But otherwise, I like the idea of diversity.
It's not just that you like. I also like diversity. I think it's something we should do just for the sake of it. But it actually shows that I think what you're hinting at is that diverse teams are actually higher performing teams. They succeed more in business. Companies with women either as board members or as C-level executives actually do better on most scales. Particularly financially, which is how businesses are often measured. And when you have a diverse team, you're actually able to take all these different viewpoints, whether it's truck driving or parenting, and you can actually apply those to the work that you're producing. For example, women make up over 50% of the online consumer business, but we only make up I think it's 15% worldwide of the developer base. And so the people who are building sites, who are building apps, who are building the experiences that we use are not like us. They don't have our same experiences. We see this in every field, not just technology, but it does have this compounding impact where if you're not building programs or products or businesses that are actually that have these diverse teams, you're actually going to miss your audience, and you're going to actually leave money on the table, really.
Yeah, and I really like also that that you mentioned that it's not just about diversity in, for example, gender, but mostly diversity in background, or in I don't know, the way of thinking, and that's a lot where we put a lot of effort into. At the same time, I have to say, when it comes to gender, we're trying really, really hard as a university to raise the number of female students, but we're still stuck at about 20%. And we realize that there's not enough we can do as a university to raise it. At least that's, I mean, we're trying hard still, but we need to start much earlier, and perhaps that's also where you can continue. And mostly what we have also some non-profit initiatives where we focus on educating not just girls, but girls and boys at a younger age, and to show them mostly to show them what they can achieve with technology and with coding. Because the interesting thing is, and I don't know if it's the same observation you made, is that many boys like technology because of itself, because it's cool, fun, I don't know.
But impact, so social impact.
Yeah, and exactly, and girls look for social impact.
I think, as you said, at your level, because many of others person they can't do anything because it's too late. I was looking for where I can really start to talk with inspire those person or just talk with them, and I started in high school, and it was even high school it was really too late to talk with this person. So now we are just looking to go in very early stage, even a very little girls, because it's not just the school. As I said, it's a really social impact. Even the parents are really not informed. They are also having this image or this idea about technology. It's just a geek behind a black screen coding. So
sometimes parents are the most sexist.
Of course,
people.
yeah, of course, because they are the must touch in this social impact. So we just want to tell them that technology today is just at all like this. So you can be a girl, a normal person, and you can code. You can do whatever you want. But and also technology is not about coding. You can really work in technology projects, but without coding. So those information, very small and a very stupid information, we think that it's normal, but people are very impacted about it. And yes, it's a very early stage that we need to change those ideas. And just a second point, it's about role models for girls. This is a very important, because they can't relate to any model today. So we need more role models, women or female, to inspire them also.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting that you bring that up, because I think the role models are the keys, and we have the burden of proof. And I know I'm going to piss off half the room now, or maybe 70% of the room, but what we see is that women are much more aware of their own abilities, and guys are so full of themselves. So when
the research proves it.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, when we put out the list, okay, these are the 5 requirements, if a woman fulfills 4 of the 5 requirements, she's like, oh, darn it, I don't fulfill the requirements. Someone like me sees it and I fulfill 1 requirement, I'm like, oh, good, I fulfill the requirements.
No, seriously, they do studies to show this, and that's one of the things that, I've advised thousands of people in their job searches now, and this is the one thing that I tell people. At the meetup Udacity had last night, we were coaching people in their careers, and that was the one thing. I was like, look, you say that you're an economist, you don't have a technical background. Economists have great technical backgrounds and analysis capabilities. Yeah, they want a physics degree. You're close enough. Apply to the job. It doesn't need to be perfect. And it's one of the things that people, particularly women, miss out on most. And so we're trying to, coach people against their natural tendencies so that they see more opportunity for themselves. So in this case, I'm advising women to be more like men, to say you're close enough. Job descriptions are totally aspirational. They're wish lists. Just go for it anyway.
Cool, nice. It's really interesting, because I was thinking as they were talking about the fact that we introduced with BBC Micro and Raspberry Pi, both of those were initiatives to get everyone, not just men, not just boys, to learn to code. But it probably failed also because it starts with the fact that they aren't encouraged. They are maybe even discouraged. If you have a program in school where you're promoting, hey, let's have these couple of weeks and we'll use the BBC Micro and we'll learn to code. But if the classroom has this stereotypical, but why are you so interested? You're a girl, that kind of fails already. So maybe what we need is something like BBC Micro all over again, but focusing on, hey, this is mainly for the girls. The guys that want to come along can, but we need to push it already that early, and it's really interesting.
Yes, I just have one example. I heard it's in France, the minister of everything about computer science or technology. He's going in all schools and see like talking with per person, and it was like one little girl, and he asked her, "What do you want to do in the future?" And she said, "Computer science and technology." And he said, "The same girl, I will come back 5 years after, and she will be ashamed to say it like in front of everybody." So what's happened between those years? And this that's why when I understand that it's not in high school, it's not like just before, it's really, really in the elementary, like the first year of education. And it's more an impact. So we can't just define the problem like this and this is the solution. So I think we all need to work on it like slowly, and we will see maybe the change after.
Cool. Yeah, and I think that's important to realize also that obviously it's the right thing to do, but probably being the capitalist bastard on this panel, we don't have a choice because we need to find more developers. So we need to engage every community that we have. It doesn't matter where you're from, sexual orientation, gender, whatever. Like, we need to get everybody on board and realize that we need to give them a chance because we don't have a choice.
Well, that really starts with actually us all modeling that behavior. So, one of the big issues in the tech industry is that even if we do train more women or train other minorities and get them to have the skill set that they need to join the industry, once they join, they're alienated. They're, the way that the cultures in companies are set up, they're not welcoming to non-conformists, essentially. And I don't think it's something that, it's like written on the wall that we don't like, people of X, but it's the kind of environment that you set up, whether or not you actually provide mentorship and training opportunities for these individuals that are actually targeted for their backgrounds. So it actually takes all of us on this panel, everybody in this room, to say that we actually want this kind of environment for ourselves where we don't want everybody to just look like me. I wouldn't want a whole team of people that are just like me. That would be, one, boring, and two, I don't think that we would succeed. I want as much diversity of thought, diversity of backgrounds, opinions, so that we can actually create better products and better experiences. And also, I get to learn continuously that way.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, just to follow up on that, because diversity tends to be some sort of a charity thing sometimes. Sometimes when people hear diversity, they're like, oh, it's a charity thing. But it's really not. It's about the business side. We need to do it to make the best products, to have the best results, and to have the most fun. So I think that's super important that we don't forget that.
We'll take some questions from the audience. I see we already have touched or answered one question that was something like BBC Micro targeted at girls. So great minds think alike. That was a great point that we already touched on. Maybe wanting to just, since we've been talking about starting in schools, how do we actually teach the concepts of programming, problem solving to children? So we'll start with the first question from the audience, from Marcus.
I think there is already some programs, but it's not, it's like bad also to start with children and having computer in front of their eyes from this age, but there is a lot of games actually, and those games, they already exist, and there is not another one that really working on it, and those games is like having the same concept of programming, and
like Scratch or?
Yes, a lot, and this is one part, and the other part, we just want them to get used to see what is it technology and what is it about girls as the boys. So this is like two parts. But of course there is a lot of games that we can do as programming.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think one thing that we're doing in Sweden right now is actually we're trying to basically trick the teacher community, because there's been a big resistance against this teaching programming in schools. So we're telling them like, no, programming is just a tool to teach logic abilities, problem solving, so it's not about coding. They learn it by coding, but sort of that's how we get the teachers on board, because when they hear programming, they're like, oh, I don't know programming, I don't want to do this. So we have to be smart about the approach, I think.
Good point, good point. I think we'll go straight to the next one, because it's something we haven't really touched so much on, like what is available and what would you choose? What is the best way to go? So a question from Stefan is, 3 to 4 university degree candidate versus, okay, so 3 to 4 years university degree versus 6 months to a year of self-educated job applicant. Who would you pick if you were on the hiring side?
I would pick both. Yeah, depending on what they are going to do, and that's always, I think, what Micael already said, that we don't, like, for example, when we do software engineering bachelor degrees, we don't want to replace computer science studies. We think there is room for more, and the world is going much more, the computer world is more complex these days than just having computer scientists for everything. And for example, here, perhaps one of them has a more theoretical, mathematical background and is going to, I don't know, optimize our databases, and the other one is more focused on, I don't know, front-end development. There's so much to it.
I think it depends on your company, kind of talking before. If you have an environment where there's good mentorship and you value people who are going to learn on the job and figure things out and are good problem solvers, then I would absolutely go for the self-study. What we've seen at Udacity in particular is that people who go through our programs have a tremendous amount of grit, and that's something that employers like Jaguar Land Rover, IBM, Daimler come to us and are actively sourcing from us because they're like, holy crap, like these people are so passionate about what they're doing. They will take whatever problem and they'll be so hungry to go figure out and solve it that you know, it's an embodiment of the lifelong learning method, like, you know, methodology basically that is much more evident. I know that doesn't mean that the person coming from a university won't also have that. But if I were to choose one, you know, I'm going to go with, you know, what I've invested my career in, which is that you want self-study.
I think about the job, it's more about the profile of the person, because if you both apply for the job, that means that you have the same skills. So whatever the way you have this education, like in 6 months or 3 years, so you both have these skills to apply to this job. So now it's like to play. It's like it's up to you. You need to convince about your profile, about your person. It's more about the personality. And this, like, how to say, the interview, it's more about the personality.
I mean, if they achieve the same skills in 4 years versus 6 months, yeah. Then it's a clear pick, I would say.
Yeah, maybe. But
cool. We can go to the one covering HDL because it's very topical. So the question is from Anonymous here. We at Austria, so like in Austria, there is the concept of HTL. I'm not going to try the German because my German is not so well. So it's a higher technical education where you can go after 8th class. You can already specialize at that point. And the question is, do you think more countries could adapt this concept? I guess.
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, okay. I think if we don't have, I think I'm the one that can relate the most to it. I think personally it is really helpful, especially for people to get a feel for if they really like programming or not, and they get exposed to it from teachers at an early stage. It doesn't necessarily exclude the possibility to supplement with or later on do other non-traditional educations. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but one of the reasons I am here is because I do run 3 meetups in Vienna, and I also have Developers Rising, a non-profit for helping developers help inspire and connect. And what I have come across there, especially with my free code camp Vienna meetup, is that we have people coming to our meetups that are already like in HDL, or like younger people that are already aware of the fact that there are these massive open online courses and boot camps and alternatives online, and they maybe even have consumed a lot of it, but are still a bit unsure if they're on the right track. So I think it's a bit confusing, but it's good to be able to help. Yeah, does anyone here know what they're referring to with the gamification concept?
I'll take that one.
You'll take that one? Okay, yeah. Cool. So the question from Anonymous is, what do you think of gamification, and could it be the future of education?
No, is in the short term. So one of the things that you learn, and I think gamification is good to get people interested and engaged in short periods, but when you actually...
Sorry to stop you, could you define gamification?
So gamification, think about a video game. You have mechanics that are developed to help hook you or trigger certain behavior to get you to come back to want to continue on. It also makes learning or whatever you're doing more fun, more like play. It's think about you know, choosing your own adventure is a common way to blend, you know, gamification and education. Also, there are plenty of learning apps. If anybody uses Duolingo, one of the gamification techniques is a streak. So you want to come back and you want to keep learning, for example. And Duolingo is a great education app. So the reason why I don't think it's the future of education, though, is that it's actually a weak form of motivation. And what I mean there is that you actually can learn a lot about motivation theory from decades and decades of research that shows that the best way to actually get people to stick with a behavior or form a habit or to continue to want to do something is actually to go after higher qualities of motivation, which are more intrinsic. What I'm talking about, in case you're interested in looking up, it's called self-determination theory. And a lot of that is actually what we use at Udacity to try to get people to understand what their motivation is. Like, why are they doing the work that they're doing, so that they can continuously tie that back. Whatever they're facing, today that might be challenging, whatever hurdle you're facing, you want to know why you're doing it. What is the point? And if there's a higher purpose, you have an ability to get better at what you're working on, you're actually more likely to come back and to have that internal drive to push you forward and propel you forward. So gamification, I think, is a great early hook, but it's not the long-lasting form of motivation that you need in order to really pursue, deeper learning on any topic.
I wouldn't say I disagree, but I think it's what we have to realize, I think all of us, is the fact that lifelong learning is not just something that we're talking about anymore. It's crucial for your success. And I meet so many people that go the traditional route. They take 5 years master studies, and then they promise me, I'm going to continue developing, I'm going to continue studying, I promise you. And then I talk to them like 5 years later, and they're like, life happened. I haven't learned anything in 5 years, and these kids are coming now talking about things I don't understand, and I'm scared. So if it's gamification, I'm not sure, but we need to have triggers to help people get engaged in learning constantly every day. I mean, I think you all have seen these JavaScript sites. I said days since the latest JavaScript framework was released, and it's always 0 because there's always a new one every day. So how do we sort of trigger people into understanding that, hey, life, kids, family, tennis, friends, all of a sudden 5 years has gone. So we need to find a way to trigger them, but of course it needs to be sincere, I think.
Awesome. Maybe we can this ties into the question of how to teach coding to non-IT professionals. Do we have some perspectives on that? I think maybe it doesn't have to be different. What's your take?
I think that first of all, computer science was inspired from the natural mechanism. I mean, biology and chemistry. And I did the both. I started with chemistry and biology. It's not hard to learn this coding, but I think the most hard part is like in our minds, like we are afraid of this black screen, this terminal. So it's just more about the idea. So if you think that you can do it, you will do it. But the way, it's just like the other way, like every other person. We are already scientific when we are like chemists or biologists. I don't think it's more easy or more difficult. It's just like as anybody else. There is no specific way. It's just normal way.
What we do a lot is, since we also think that intrinsic motivation is the most important driver, we call it curiosity-driven education, code. Yeah, came later. But what we do is we like to mix people. We like to create teams of, for example, a chemistrist together with software developers and designers, and put them in some sort of hackathon. So they can start by looking at what others are doing and then learning from them. So sometimes I think that might be a good idea, especially if you don't have so much time. Like if you have like a week of training or so, you can create like hackathon-like formats, which work really well because they motivate people, because they're curious about each other and teamwork, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I would like to add that we have had the pleasure of working with a lot of chemists, and those guys are unbelievable when it comes to documentation. So the developers have really learned from them when they mix the teams, and they've taken it to the next level when it comes to documentation, commenting in code. So it really becomes this sort of mutual admiration that the coders are really like, wow, you could actually document that way. And of course, the chemists feel like, wow, you're really great at this developing. So sort of the peer-to-peer approach and taking the best from each person.
I think we're, yeah, sir.
I'm just watching a question like, how, as a man, how can I support and help and push girls and women? This is very important because a man could be like, the woman could be your daughter, your sister, or your mother. Or I mean, you are already always like in touch with the woman. I think first of all, give them more confidence because this is what is really like in girls, and not like just push them. Because even in InspireHer, we do not want to push everybody to go in technology. We just make sure that they have the right information. They get like enough informed about the options they are having today, and they gonna choose. So it's more about confidence and tell them that they can do it. Like it's just an option for them.
And maybe that is normal. Like it should be normal.
Exactly. It should be normal.
And I say kudos to whoever asked this question. That's the first step. Ask questions, be curious, want to engage on these topics. So often people try to avoid them, and that's never going to solve anything.
Awesome. We're almost finished, and I think we'll do a stunt experiment. We'll take the last question on top, and I'll ask each panelist, and I'll add a third one. Education. Formal, informal, or both? Micael?
Both.
Both.
Definitely both.
Both.
There you go. Thank you everyone for coming. Thanks for having us.